What up, though? Welcome back to the Mic Check Podcast. It's your boy T Word, the People's Champion. My co-host Q, aka Right on Q. What's good, man?
What up, man? What's good, man? It's happy Memorial Day to everybody out there, and
For sure.
hope everybody's enjoying their extra day off. I know today feels like Sunday, like we need to go back to work, but hopefully everybody gets to enjoy an extra day off if they're lucky to have one.
Absolutely, and definitely we honor those who have sacrificed, gave the greatest sacrifice. I'm the son of a soldier, so I really honor the troops. So it's a big deal for me to get to Memorial Day. So we honor those that have fought for our freedom. So now that we got that out of the way, we're here to talk about some boxing. This is our weekly Sunday stream, 5:30 Central Time. Tell a friend to join us right here on the Mic Check Podcast. We had some boxing this week, even if it wasn't fighters that you're familiar with. We definitely have some people get in the ring starting on Friday and all the way through Saturday. And then we're going to talk about the biggest news in boxing, as well as preview a little bit of what's going on next week with the GWOAT. So, Q, before we get into, you got anything you want to share with the people?
Not really, man. I think it was just overall a good week of boxing. I know a lot of the boxing that was, held yesterday was not necessarily major for the American crowd, but if you're a boxing fan that follows international boxing in general, it was, three really entertaining cards. I had all three of them on simulcast, and all three of them, one on my TV, one on my laptop, and one on my other laptop. So that goes to show you that, I found equal value in all three fight cards. And all three of them, for the most part, as far as the main events, all of the main events were very entertaining, and they're fights that I'm going to actually go back and watch again at some point, because it's hard to really get to kind of keep a close eye on one match when you got essentially three of them going on kind of around the same time. One of them started a little bit earlier, the top ranked card, intentionally, and I knew that kind of going into the situation because Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren had made an agreement that, hey, we're going to go a little bit earlier so that our fights don't clash for the TV audience, and they had announced that they were going to do that. So that made it a little bit easier. Plus the fact that the Frank Warren / top rank card ended in a knockout. So it ended earlier than, the full 12 rounds anyway. So that actually helped out a little bit as well for the viewing part.
Definitely. It's absolutely helpful when cards are getting staggered and stuff like that. Gives you an opportunity to bounce back and forth. And then when you get an early stoppage, you could flip over just that much quicker, kind of similar to a few weeks ago. We had that kind of go down when I think it was the Fandora fight. We ended up getting a knockout in the top rank, and then we were able to jump over. And I think the week of the Rolly fight, Janabek got his guy out of there early, and we were able to jump over as well. So it's always cool when you can see everything. Unfortunately for me, I had some other engagements going on, so I didn't get to quite see everything, but I saw main events, and then what I didn't get to see, I went back and watched. So that's the good thing about having streams that allow replays right away. You can always wake up the next morning and get a view. But we're going to circle back to that shortly. Let's go ahead and talk about the biggest news in boxing this week, because, it's 15 minutes of fame. But I think this one is going to flame for a while and burn. Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford put out information this week that is going down.
Yep.
Finally. We've done our instant reaction videos. Now we've both had time to sit with it, confirm some specifics. So I think this is a good time to talk about what we think about it. And guys, we're not going to give our analysis of who's going to win. We got that coming. Trust me. We got it all mapped out. We're going to tell you all about who will win and why. But today we just want to tell you about how we feel about the fight, because for some of us out here, we were kind of giving up on the fight. So I know I'm going to express my perspective. So I want Q to jump in first and tell the people how you were feeling kind of leading up when you heard that negotiations had resumed, and then where your feelings went or your perspective went after you heard the news.
Well, I mean, over the last, I guess, really since the Tank Hector Luis Garcia fight was the most recent time when quote unquote talks had kind of reignited. Steven Espinosa had been asked at that press conference, whether there was any truth to the fact that they were still trying to get a Spence Crawford fight to happen earlier on this year. And he kind of alluded to the fact that, well, the conversations are continuing, which is more of kind of the same thing that we heard pretty much all last year. But For me, it really didn't move me when they actually started rumoring that the date was agreed and that the deal was going to be agreed for July 29th, just because there's been a lot of back and forth and kind of knowing how boxing goes. A lot of times these big fights are extremely difficult to make and sometimes almost impossible to make.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one saving grace I would say with the fact of this fight is that because Terrence Crawford left Top Rank, and because of the fact that there wasn't going to be any broadcasting or network conflicts, I think that helped to get this fight over the line ultimately, because I still have reservations that if Crawford was still with Top Rank, or if he was with a Golden Boy or any other major network that would have wanted to have a piece of the pie, so to speak, with the fight against Errol Spence,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how feasible it would have been for them to go ahead and get that done. We know that the Zone / Showtime relationship is there because of the Tank versus Ryan fight. But I think that maybe what made that fight go over the line for me was just the sheer numbers and the popularity of both fighters brought in enough money and enough revenue that both the Zone and Showtime felt like, okay, we'll eat a little bit of the loss, so to speak, for having to share the broadcast or having to concede some things because this fight is
such a big
do so well. I don't think that Crawford versus Spence will necessarily do as well because it's just not as popular of a fight between the two guys. But my initial thoughts when they said, well, they're going to, revisit it for July, I was like, yeah, okay, well, let's see. And then once the fighters actually said something, that for me pretty much stamped it. The only other way that I would have felt how I feel now, I mentioned it on Twitter, was if, there had been, a press conference date and time, or if the tickets went on sale. I know AXS has a placeholder now on the app. I've actually looked at it. There's a placeholder to buy tickets, but obviously you can't buy them yet because they haven't worked all of that out yet. And I'm sure they'll announce that whenever they do the press conference. But those were the only other two ways that I would have felt confident knowing that the fight was going to happen on the date that was rumored. But when the fighters both have a fight poster, they both posted, they both are saying the same thing, to me, that tells me all that I need to know that the fight, I feel confident that the fight is going to happen.
For sure. They definitely got lock and step really quick. I don't know if it was negotiated that Terrence Crawford would post first, but we did see that he got the first dibs, and this is what I screen grabbed from his Instagram on the screen right now. So he basically said, he's spearing the big fish. That can't be more clear, right? And then Errol Spence, obviously, it's just as petty. So he came back with shaking the hand and, strap season. He's basically repurposing his original big fish design, and he milking the shit out of it.
You know what I will say though, man? I will say this. Even at that point, I still was not all the way convinced. It wasn't until they both posted that Showtime, PPV, date, time, venue poster that made me feel like, okay, now we got something. Because see, all of that meme stuff and the graphic stuff and the shirt stuff, that's been going on for years. That's been going on for a long time. This right here, that's new. That has not been done before. That there were plenty of graphics of them fighting each other or, of them both in the ring with one of them knocked down, but official fight poster with a date, time, logos, all that kind of stuff, that gets me going. And that's the same thing I said about the Tank and Ryan fight. If you remember, we talked about that as well.
You did. I knew they were going to take a different approach with that one. So it was very much because they're social media guys. I knew that they didn't need the traditional media because they were going to do big numbers due to their personal popularity, not so much because they're popular fighters. But to go along with what you're saying, it took me about 2 days after the official announcement before I got that hype back that, okay, I'm ready to see it. The first day it came out, I didn't want to make a video. The second day it came out, I made a video late the second day after it had been announced that it was going down because I didn't want to jump the gun and be one of those channels that we put the news out and then there's some bullshit. So I was like, man, I need to sleep on it a little bit longer. And then that second day, I was like, okay, I started seeing purse numbers. I started seeing stuff that we didn't see the first time. And then I saw it from credible news outlets outside of ESPN and outside of Coppinger, aka Cappinger. I was like, okay, you know what?
But you don't like his reporting. Is that what we're saying?
I think that sometimes he is wanting to be first. So there's times where he puts out BS and then he has to retract too much. It becomes questionable when that happens. I mean, you do the news like that's, you're a true journalist. You know what it's about, vetting things before you put them out. You're not going to put something out on rumor or hearsay without solid facts. And I feel like sometimes he forgoes that because he doesn't really have the oversight. So sometimes it's cap. So, and I'm going to get these jokes off. So you already know how it go. But
I guess I just wonder, I mean, is there anything, because did you have a chance to read the ESPN article in full or no?
I did.
Okay. Based on everything that he reported, do you feel like there's anything that's at this point not going to be the actual truth, or anything that you read that you feel like, well, no, that's probably not going to be the case?
No. This time I feel like it's good because it's also been corroborated by other sources. When he came out with information in 2022, it turned out that a lot of that stuff wasn't what happened. It was a version of it, but it wasn't the actual facts. So that gave me reason to pause when I saw a report with him attached to it. So, but there's other instances where he's done good. It's just sometimes I feel like he puts stuff out to be first instead of being right. And I'd rather be right than be first, because people are going to rock with you more and count you as credible when you're always consistently correct. And I think that was something that was lacking in his original reporting in 2022. And I know how much steam it had on it, like being the first to report anything on that fight around June, July, August last year. You was going to get your name way up the list of notable, credible journalists. And I think that was the mission, and it just kind of backfired. But that being said, when it came out, I saw it. I knew it was some legitimacy to it. But then I was like, okay, let me get some validation elsewhere. And then I'm going to take it to the next step. And then we'll start to make videos and start to put our content list together. And obviously that's what we did. We've got stuff already set up for people to go because we've been able to validate. You've obviously been able to corroborate it. I've been able to do the same. So it's good to go. But once I got that validation, it was go time. It was like, you know what? This shit about to go down, bro. I'm ready. So I'm pretty excited about that. Again, like I've been saying since we started the video, we have content ready to go for you guys where we're going to talk about this fight and give you all kinds of different angles and perspective that you won't hear anywhere else. So one thing about the mic check, Q's a true journalist. I do some fringe journalism. We know what the fuck we doing, and we're going to put it out there for y'all the right way. But I do believe that this is going to be big news for quite some time. I don't think it's going to be 15 minutes of fame. Do you believe that they're going to be able to carry the steam for this fight through July?
I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic because, I mean, just from what I've seen already, Terrence has posted, some highlights of him training in Las Vegas, which is an interesting dynamic. And it makes me wonder why he's training in Vegas, because I know typically he and Bomac have trained in Colorado Springs or in Nebraska at his gym at home. Mm-hmm. But he's in Vegas and he's had a lot of footage, and he already, his first day of training, he pretty much put out some stuff on social media, which I think is it's incumbent upon the fighters that if they want this fight to sell as well as it can, it's on them to push the fight, to remind people that the fight is going to be happening, and to continue to give them regular updates of how their training is going, whether it be through their own social media or through traditional outlets by doing interviews, going on talk shows. Obviously, both of them had a 7-minute segment on First Take, on Friday morning. So that was really great to see. The one thing that I guess for me that I will be really interested to see as far as promotion is concerned is, are we going to get the traditional 2 episodes of All Access? Is this going to be something that they're going to, invest a little bit more money on and do, maybe, more than that? Are they going to do 3? I know that previously when, Floyd had a lot of his fights in his heyday when he first went to Showtime, they would do up to 3 episodes. I remember the Cotto fight had 3 episodes. And I think the De La Hoya fight, I think that one was still on HBO. That one was a 3-episode preview as well. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, if these guys kind of come out of their natural character to promote themselves, because that's the one thing, unfortunately. I mean, you can't help who you are, but both of these guys seem like fairly reserved and quiet dudes. I mean, they're unleashed and unhooked in the ring as competitors, but outside of the ring, they seem very laid back and casual, both of them. And it was kind of interesting. Some people's response to the First Take interview was that they were almost being too nice to each other because neither one of them really even wanted to get into any kind of a argument or a debate, even if Stephen A was kind of prodding or trying to set one of them up, to kind of say something to rile the other guy up. Both of them seem to just be like, you know what, he knows what it is. I know what it is. It's here. Which, I mean, that's true. It's not going to affect the fight. Right. Will it affect the amount of people that want to watch the fight? I would say yes. I think.
Well, and I agree with that. I think that, they try to find that balance of stepping outside of their general character and getting into a marketable character. Errol's kind of been in the way PBC promotes, the way they do things. Terrence hasn't necessarily been pushed that way because that's just not how Top Rank markets. For the most part, they keep it. Look, these guys are going to fight, and this is a good fight. That's kind of the way that they prop up their fights. Like with Loma and Devin, it was these are marquee fighters, and you should be interested in seeing marquee fighters battle. They don't really go into you should like this guy, you should like this guy. They don't get into that house husbands aspect of it. But in order to sell to a casual fan, you need the reality TV version of these dudes, and I think that that's part of what was the conversations. To me, I think that was the conversations between Terrence and Errol leading up to this finalization of their fight. Hey, this is what they've been coaching me to do since I've been going through PBC and Showtime. This is what my tips are so we can make sure that we make the most money possible because we get in the split of this pay-per-view. So let's make sure that people buy the crap out of it. So to second what you're saying, I do believe that they kind of started off reserved, but I think they also understand you have to build. You can't start at the top because where do you go? So you have to start at, we're going to kind of throw little jabs at each other, but we're not going to throw power punches yet. When we get to week 7, 8 into the fight lead up, I think that's when we're going to see something different. But for me, I think the biggest thing was it was good to see that they both are getting at it right away because sometimes they don't get the build. Now, and I want to close out what I want to say, and I'm going to throw it back to you before we wrap up this segment. But I think what I've seen is 3, what do they call it, all access for the average for Errol and Tank. Those are the only guys getting them. They do 2 before, and then they do an epilogue.
Right.
I think it used to be 3 and then the epilogue because most of Wilder's stuff had 3 episodes and then the epilogue. So I think they're going to go back to that format, and that's going to make a big difference. So I'm going to throw it back to you, and then we'll move on to the fight cards.
Yeah, I think ultimately it'll be really interesting as far as promotion is concerned to see if, there's going to be a lot of highlighting of, the things that Crawford, has accomplished and the things that he does really well. Because obviously he, as far as we know at this point, is not a quote unquote PBC guy. He did this deal to get this fight with this opponent. And there's a possibility that maybe whoever wins this fight or wins the rematch has a chance to move up and fight Jermell if he's still undisputed at that point. But, sometimes there's always going to be a little bit of preference. And I would assume that because people are familiar as far as PBC are concerned with Errol, that they're going to probably favor and think that, he's the favorite in the fight. I haven't looked at any odds at this point, but I would assume that he probably is starting out as the betting favorite.
No, it's even.
It's even. So I wonder, how the promotion will lean, eventually when it comes to, who they favor in this fight, who they think will win the fight. And if there will be, any kind of leniency towards Errol, because he is their guy. He's the guy that they've built up. He's the guy that they've invested a lot of money in. And it would be beneficial for them if he wins the fight. I mean, that goes without being said.
I've actually got some thoughts on that. And I think in order to make this the most valuable fight possible, because we're probably looking at an $85, $100 price tag, I think that they're going to have to make sure that they let everybody know that is PBC followers, Showtime followers that don't know enough about Terrence Crawford. They have to build him up in their minds to understand. So you've got to put the sauce on Crawford. So I think it would make sense to make a balance. You have to make it sound 50-50, even if you don't think it's 50-50. Even if your guy is telling you it's going to be a one-sided ass whooping, you still have to market it as 50-50, because the moral is we need everybody possible to buy it, and we need them to believe this is the 2023 version of the 80s Four Kings type of stuff. You know, so I think that the marketing is going to reflect that. Showtime has shown to be very savvy marketers, because they've been able to sell some bullcrap fights as big deals. You know it. So they've been able to sell bullcrap matchups as big deals because they understand marketing. I think their machine gets it. And I think that that's what you're going to see behind this fight. You're going to see them take an actual good matchup, and it's that much easier for the marketing people to be like, we ain't got to do nothing but just stroke the brush. We don't have to try and be Picasso. It's going to paint itself. It's AI at this point. So that's kind of what I think. I think the marketing is going to be good. But I want to go ahead and get us to transition into the weekend recap. I didn't get to see the card with Michael Conlon. So I'm going to throw it to Q, guys. I'm actually grilling right now. I'm going to go turn over my chicken wings, and Q is going to break down what happened in the Conlon card and the fight. And I'll be right back. Q, you got it, bro.
I appreciate it. So, yeah, Mick Conlon did get his chance, second chance, I should say, to challenge for the world title at 126 pounds. Unfortunately, he was again knocked out. This time, I believe it was a 5th-round knockout that he suffered. Up to that point in the fight against Luis Alberto Lopez, there was always this era of caution that had to be used, because Mick is a guy who, at this point now, he's chinny. He's been, severely knocked out on 2 occasions in less than 2 years now. He was knocked out by Lee Wood back in March of 2022 in the 12th round of their fight. And then, unfortunately, he got knocked out in the 5th round of this previous fight after already, being severely hurt earlier in the fight. So it's going to be really interesting moving forward to kind of see what Top Rank is going to do for Luis Alberto Lopez. My thoughts are that I think he should get a fight at home in Mexico, or a fight in the Southwest. For those that don't know, Luis Alberto Lopez is from Mexicali, Mexico, which is just on the border of Southern California and Mexico, very close to El Centro, California. So they easily could do a San Diego fight. They could do a fight in Tijuana. I know that they have a relationship with Zanfer Promotions, and possibly maybe they could host a fight somewhere in that region of the country and let Zanfer take the lead there. I don't believe that Lopez is in a contract with anyone else, on the other side of the border in Mexico. So, but as far as, Conlon is concerned, it's unfortunate because he's in a difficult situation where, if he says, okay, I'm big at 126 and my punch resistance is kind of starting to wane. Should I move up to 130 so that I can feel better as far as my weight is concerned? Because he is a fairly tall guy for featherweight. BoxRec has him listed at 5'8". I don't know that he's that tall. He might be 5'7". But that's a tall guy for featherweight. Maybe he needs to look to move to super featherweight. And if he does that, there are a lot of guys that Mick Conlon can get fights with. Unfortunately for him, a lot of those guys are extremely, extremely dangerous guys. We're talking about Oscar Valdez. We're talking about Emmanuel Navarrete. We're talking about, some very dangerous punchers at 130 pounds. But if he stays where he's at 126, who can he fight? That's going to be the question moving forward. Currently, he's a top 15, top 20 guy, but who can he really fight and who can he really beat? Because, there's a possibility, ironically, Nick Ball, who is a, viable world title contender, who fights for Frank Warren. Frank Warren has a relationship with Top Rank, and Nick Ball's from the UK. That's a fight that possibly could happen for Mick Conlon. But Nick Ball is a puncher. I mean, Nick Ball is a guy who he's a smaller guy, but he's a rough and tumble pressure fighter. I don't really know, what realistically can be done for him after a second challenge for a world title where he was severely hurt and severely knocked out. So it'll be interesting to see what Top Rank does, because honestly, they really wanted him to win this fight so that they could have him fight Robeisy Ramirez. Robeisy Ramirez is a well-schooled Cuban champion that beat Isaac Dogbe for the WBO title about a month or two ago, I believe. And they were trying to set up a fight between those two guys because both of those two guys are fairly familiar to the American audience. Luis Alberto Lopez is not nearly as familiar, which is why I think they kind of squeezed him into trying to defend his title for the first voluntary defense on the road. I mean, typically when a guy wins a title on the road, especially on another promotional team's platform, you usually give him a homecoming fight and let him kind of enjoy his belt, at least for one fight. Well, no, they told Lopez, hey, you got to go back across the pond and fight our guy, Mick Conlon, on the road. But, he proved to be better than Conlon. He had Conlon hurt a couple of times in that fight. And ultimately, his unorthodox style was just too difficult to deal with. And unfortunately, which we're going to get to it, I assume in our next topic, we actually lost out on an all-Mexican brawl that possibly could have happened based on this weekend's result.
All right, guys, I'm back. So that was the Conlon card. Let's go ahead and jump over to, and I'm assuming you saw a Coley and Billum Smith, right?
I did.
Okay,
yeah.
That one I definitely missed. I couldn't get everything set up in time enough. But so let's talk about Laura Wood 2. And we'll quickly go over why only one guy was eligible to have the championship at the end of this fight. So the simple version is this, guys. In order to safely lose weight, you should be trending at a certain percentage dropped over time leading up to a fight. Something that may be more easier for you to recall is Jake Paul had a specific plan for Rahman Jr. What's his name? Hakeem Rahman Jr. to lose weight. And by a certain date, he had to be at a certain weight. And part of it was because he wanted to weight drain him. But the other part was because in order to safely lose weight, right, you need to hit these benchmarks at a certain time. Once that didn't occur in this particular situation, it was the British Board of Boxing and Control. They basically were like, no, enough is enough. You can't lose the weight safely. We're just going to take your belt, basically. We're not going to allow you to continue to lose weight. And then they put a stipulation in that he couldn't be below a certain weight at the weigh-in because they would feel like he was too drained and now he's at a health risk. That's the short, twisted version of what actually happened. There's a more technical way to explain it. But I think for our listeners out there, just to keep it simple, he just wasn't on track to make the weight safely. And they made a business decision to protect him. And I'm actually not mad at that. Q, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a health risk to severely lose, lots and lots of weight in a short span of time. I know that a lot of our American watchers might be familiar with the fact that a lot of fighters may employ that kind of method, but in the UK, it is illegal. So is the use of saunas. There's been some fights that have been called off because fighters have been caught using sweat saunas the weeks of fights to try to get weight off faster. And so, all of this that was done was really just at the safety of Lara because, he came in too heavy. And there's something that I said even before, all of this news broke, which I believe happened on Thursday. I believe it was. His check weight was Thursday and they weighed in on Friday. Lara, the last two trips he's had to fight Leigh Wood, has shown up in the UK the week of the fight. And I said it during the first fight that was originally scheduled 3 months ago. He looked really, really big, at his open workout. It looked like he still had a lot of weight that he needed to lose. Not that he was fat or anything, but, he didn't look like he had in his previous fight during the fight. He still looked like there was a lot of weight he needed to take off. And he was able to do that. So obviously he had made those weight checks, clean and clear the first time around. But when you come back to the UK for a second time, and both times are the week of the fight. From my experience and what I know about most fighters, especially if they're having to make a drastic change in time zone, Mauricio Lara is from Mexico City. That's where he trains. That's a Central Standard Time zone. The UK is 6 hours ahead of us. I checked it after I saw.
You get there early.
So he typically fighters will get there anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time to, number one, acclimate to the time zone that they're going to be in. Number three, that if there's any issues with equipment, with medicals, with anything that goes wrong, they have time while there to try to get the situation resolved. And on fight week is an awful time to try to get anything else done because you have all of these media obligations pretty much the last 3 or 4 days that you're there. Yeah. So I kind of thought, for a fight that he was losing, and not that he got lucky because he's knocked guys out with that same punch more than once before, that left hook that he throws. I thought that he was making a mistake by showing up the Monday before the fight. And obviously, he miscalculated the weight as well, because he can't even use the excuse, well, he wasn't familiar with the rule or he didn't know that they were going to require that, because it's the same terms and conditions that he had 3 months ago, because he fought in the UK, the last time he fought Lee Wood. So right call. The only thing I probably would have done differently, I guess, is I probably would have said that, Lara has a choice in that situation to either, have the belt go vacant and he can be considered mandatory for it immediately after if he wants to attempt to try to make the weight again, by at least giving him another opportunity to fight for the belt again if he's able to, clear protocol for whoever wins the title. But I can understand why they wouldn't do that, because I'm sure that there was, explicitly expressed when the fight was signed that these are the things that you have to do. So,
well, like you said, it's not his first time over there. You already knew what it was when you came this time, and you messed up. I don't believe in giving grace in that situation, because you knew what time it was. And you came over there fat, and you put yourself in a bad spot. And we are adults, and when we make mistakes, we suffer the consequences, and the consequence was you get stripped of your title, and now your opponent gets to fight for a belt and you don't. I believe.
What do you think about the fact that Lee Wood agreed to still fight him at a weight class above him, when he could have, from what I was told and what I saw, he could have just had another fight rescheduled and fight for the vacant title against somebody at the weight who probably was less dangerous than Lara?
I consider it a good thing. I give credit to Lee Wood for doing that. And he also knew he was beating his ass that first fight. And you say it wasn't a lucky punch, and it wasn't luck. There's no luck in boxing. Right. I think it was a well-timed punch, but it was a mistake by Lee Wood. He came in with his hands down, and he had protected from that punch several times leading up to it. And he came in with his hands down like he had a mental lapse. Yeah. So when you leave a fight knowing I had you dead to rights, he was beating him up. I mean, how many rounds did that go? 8 rounds before he got?
It was a 7th round knockout, I think.
Okay, so you beat him 5 out of 7, and then you pretty much beat him up this last fight. You knew you had this guy's number, and you knew it was a mistake. So it's like, no, I don't care what you weigh. You can't beat me. And if you look at the way this last fight played out, you knew who was the better boxer. Lara can fight, but as far as the boxing went, Lee Wood had his number, and he knew it. So he wasn't going to let this opportunity to end up fighting somebody that might actually be a tougher unknown when he knows he can beat him, even if he's a little heavy. Because like you said, he came in probably right a little above or a little below where he arrived this last time. He probably was close to that before, but he was just enough. Funny thing, though, I want to throw this out, and then we'll move on to the next card. I talked to Tim Bradley over the weekend on Saturday, and we were talking about it. And he said he traveled. This is something that he said smart fighters do this. They only eat like fruits and veggies the week of and stuff that they could kind of bring with them that they could just declare. You don't eat the food in country, and you bring your own scale. And you make sure that there's a gym that's not connected to the promoter that you could go to and get a weight, and you have them put that weight on their scale and your scale to make sure it's right. He said they tried to screw him on a 2-pound weight differential, and he was able to get a weight from a local gym, and his scale was perfect to the weight, and the other scale was 2 pounds over. They were trying to beat him out of a title. So I think that in this particular case, you kind of also want to always be sure the scale's on the up and up. And I think that just for Lara, it's just ill preparation. As a professional, you got to be prepared. So that was something I found interesting. I want to throw it. So Lara obviously takes care of business. Do you have any thoughts on the way the fight played out? Were you surprised in any way, I guess?
I wasn't surprised necessarily at the result because I agree. I think Lee Wood probably won 5 of the 7 rounds they shared in the first fight. Lara did, hurt him more than once, but it wasn't a sustained beating because that's not the kind of fighter that, Mauricio Lara is. He's an ambush fighter. He's a guy that fights in spurts. He's a guy that, comes with wild punches and ultimately gets you hurt, has a flurry and gets you out of there. That's pretty much what he does. Yeah. And ironically, his style is somewhat similar, not necessarily exactly a carbon copy, but his style is very similar to Luis Alberto Lopez, which was something that I alluded to while you had to step out for a minute, was that unfortunately, because Mauricio came in overweight, because of the fact that he did not win the rematch, obviously, we probably lose out on the opportunity or the possibility of seeing Mauricio Lara against Luis Alberto Lopez, because that would have been an awesome fight to see in general. I mean, that gives me, Miguel Berchelt, Oscar Valdez vibes all over again. It gives me Oscar Valdez against Emmanuel Navarrete vibes. 2 action fighters, ambush guys, heavy-handed punchers who I'm sure are familiar with each other because they're both right around the same age and in the same weight class. But to see them do it under the bright lights would have been really interesting. But the great thing for Mauricio is that he's an entertaining guy. The UK fans know him now. The US fans know him. Matchroom has a lot of options for him. And realistically, I think that we see Mauricio Lara challenging, at 130 pounds for a title probably in the next year, I would assume, because he's an entertainment guy and he sells well in the UK. He's been involved in 2 fights now that have been complete sellouts. So I could easily see them doing, him against Joe Cordina. I could easily see them doing, a fight between him and Zelfer Barrett. Those are 2 fights off the top of my head that are, easy to make in fights that I think he would feel confident that, if I correct some things on my end, I have a chance to knock both of these guys out.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be interested to see what's going to come next. We're going to throw it next to Okolie versus Billum Smith, which you were able to take a look at. So this is another one, like I said, I'm going to send it your way where you can kind of break down what you thought about that one. And folks, I'll be right back. Q, take it away.
Yeah. So, Okolie versus Billum Smith was kind of a fight that a lot of people thought might have been a difficult watch. And it honestly ended up being a difficult watch just because of the sheer nature of all of the holding, the grappling, the wrestling that Okolie fights have been accustomed to. So no surprise from that aspect. What was surprising was the fact that Okolie had so much trouble landing any kind of clean shots on Chris Billum Smith throughout the duration of that fight. Chris Billum Smith was well prepared. And obviously the fact that his trainer used to be Okolie's trainer, I assume plays a huge factor in how well Chris Billum Smith was prepared for everything that Okolie wanted to do. Okolie's straight right hand did not land. His left hook wasn't landing. His jab was not emphatic enough to land or do any kind of damage. And Okolie, from that aspect, is a fairly limited fighter because he's not a guy that comes from a deep amateur background. He's not a guy that's been in boxing his entire life. And he's a guy that pretty much is, a straightforward 1-2-3 fighter. He doesn't throw many hooks. He doesn't have much of a body attack. He almost never throws any kind of an uppercut. And he's certainly not a mover or a defensive wizard in there. So he was what, Chris Billum Smith would have expected. He's, what Shane McGuigan, his trainer, would have expected. So there's no surprises there. What I was most surprised about was that Okolie couldn't land clean. And also the fact that he was hurt. He got hurt on it like 2 or 3 occasions. He was knocked down 2 or 3 times. The third time, I think, was more so getting hit while off balance and being exhausted and tired. But man, I mean, Okoli has some serious things to think about whether what he wants to do going from here. He obviously has a rematch clause, so he could rematch Chris Billum-Smith if he chooses to. But if he doesn't do that, it's going to be very limited options to see what he can do, because really the only thing he may be able to do is move up to heavyweight. But even if he gets to heavyweight, I mean, Boxer doesn't really have any of the top guys at heavyweight for him to fight. I mean, unless he's willing to go back down to, fighting, contenders, guys, like Fraser Clark or, guys around that realm. I mean, I just don't see really who he fights next at heavyweight that gets him any kind of serious consideration from a ratings perspective. He probably has to fight Chris Billum-Smith again, and we have to see if he's able to make any adjustments. The one thing I will say, and I'm going to toss it back to T and get his thoughts on this, because he does know about this guy fairly well. Is Sugar Hill a great trainer, or is he a guy that just had the right game plan for a fighter that was able to execute it? Because since Okoli has gone to Sugar Hill, he's looked awful. I mean, he's had 3 fights now with Sugar Hill. I'm sorry, is it 3 fights? Yeah, 3 fights now with Sugar Hill as his trainer. He fought Mikhail Sislak in an underwhelming fight. He fought David Light in an underwhelming fight as his debut on the Sky Sports platform. And then he clearly lost to Chris Billum-Smith, and was almost taken out on 2 occasions in that fight. So does this have an indictment, or does this say anything to you about Sugar Hill as a trainer, or about the fact that maybe they can't work together and they're not a good match?
I think it's probably a situation of the match. I think Sugar Hill's a really good trainer. I think he's one of the better trainers. But I think that it's a style situation. A lot of what I've said about different people going to Derek James to get his assistance, I don't know that everybody fits. It's the delivery style. It's the adjustments in the ring. Can you respond when you're being coached in the corner between rounds? And sometimes a fighter's language versus a trainer's language, when bullets are flying, it's not synced up. And this could be a situation of that. I'm not going to take anything away from the fighter. I'm not going to take anything away from the trainer. I believe that the magic just isn't there between them. And sometimes that's all it is. And that's why you'll see a fighter have some rough fights, and then they'll go get with another trainer. And it's not so much that the other trainer is so much better. It's just like, yo, this guy gets me, and he can pull out of me the things that are necessary. So to answer your question, I don't indict either person. I just believe that it's maybe just not a good marriage.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, because I mean, Lawrence Okoli, man, he put everything into this transition. He changed trainers, he changed promoters, he changed management, all within the same span of about 6 months. And ever since all of those changes have happened, his career has just taken a nosedive. It's a difficult position for him to be in, because at this point, there's not really anybody for him to fight other than to rematch Chris Billum-Smith and try to get his belt back. Because without his belt, he's not a ticket seller. He's not a very entertaining guy to watch because of his style that makes him successful. And he's in a division where there's not a lot of money elsewhere on other platforms either, which is a lot of the reason why, in my opinion, Matchroom decided to go ahead and let him go to Sky, because they, were going to take him to court to try to get him to have his last fight with them before leaving, but just decided against it because they didn't think that it was going to be worth the money that it would take to try to keep him for that last fight. And I mean, he's been trying to get a Jay Opataya fight. Before that, he was trying to get a Marius Bradis fight. They hadn't been able to get Arsene Goulamarian, WBA champion, in the ring. And now it looks like, if he's not able to, avenge his loss to Chris Billum-Smith and get his WBO title back, he's going to have a real hard time getting back into the mainstream audience's consciousness, which honestly, I unfortunately, I'm going to say is probably going to be the same issues that Joshua Buatsi is going to face as well.
Yeah, and I do believe that that's something that's important. What you're saying there, getting into that mainstream consciousness and staying there is going to get you the bigger fights, even if you're losing. But just to kind of circle back to what you started that point with, as far as making all those changes, sometimes that can take a toll on you that you can't see before you start the process. And then once you're in it, you can't just stop and say, hey, I need a moment to collect myself. You've got to keep going because you've got to keep your name in the consciousness. And that maybe is something that he's experiencing, and that could be part of why you're seeing those dip in performance. And that's unfortunate. Hopefully, given a little bit more time, maybe it's due for a trainer change. I think that's the one thing that might affect you the most in the ring is your relationship with your trainer. So that might be somewhere I would look first, and maybe even talk to Sugar Hill and find out, well, you're not the only trainer. Maybe he's not spending enough time with Sugar Hill in camp, or maybe there's somebody else in the camp that he has a better vibe with that can take the lead when he fights. I do want to throw to this comment real quick. We got Jay in the building. What up, though? What up, fellas? What fight in history comes to mind when you think about the upcoming Spence versus Bud? Been watching Leonard versus Hagler and Hagler versus Hearns. Q, you go first because I really don't have a good answer at the moment. I got to process.
Yeah, just as you were reading that, it kind of got me thinking. I think, honestly, I mean, not that either one of these guys are the all-time greats at this point, but I think he actually answered it for you. I think, in my mind, while Hagler was not a welterweight, I think if Hagler was a welterweight and had fought Leonard while Leonard was at welterweight, I think it would be very similar dynamic to what we're going to see in this fight. A come forward, aggressive, nonstop action guy in Spence or Hagler against a well-rounded, lightning quick, violent striking boxer puncher,
sharp puncher,
like Spence or like Bud or like Leonard.
Sure.
I think that both of those guys, when you talk about Bud and Leonard, are guys that like to meld their styles between being a pure boxer at times and being a boxer puncher. And then I think there's not a whole lot of frills or thrills as far as variety with Spence or Hagler. They're just a train that continues to mow at you and continue to move forward in your direction. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think that you actually answered that question for yourself, Jay. I think Leonard and Hagler is a great example. While we're on the show, I'm going to look things up and see if there's another fight that could be another good example of that as well, and I'll bring it up if I find it.
I've been kind of looking that kind of thing up too. Like, what fight made me think of this particular matchup? Like, what can I recall? It's just not hitting me. Now, as far as excitement goes, a lot of people. So here's one thing I want to throw, and then we're going to get to the last card of the day. This is the biggest fight between two African-American fighters since, I think, Floyd versus Zab. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let me think here.
Because I think Shane came after, but Shane wasn't at his level.
Shane wasn't close. Shane wasn't close enough to his peak at that point. I would agree.
Yeah, but I think Floyd and Zab were really they were riding high. So I think that's the last big marquee fight between two African-American guys, because there's been big marquee fights where it's different ethnicities and races in it. But as far as two dudes, and the reason I bring that up is because you're talking about a shared fan base and how much hype can you get behind the fight. Yeah. So that's going to be important to the number. Something we're going to discuss at another time, but it kind of registered, and I want to throw that out there. Brandon House, peace and love, family. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Yes, sir. Do you
another
have a
example
on that before we go?
Yeah, I think honestly, for me, man, I mean, the closest thing, and the fight didn't happen, so no, it's not going to be any bigger than what the fight that we're going to get, because the fight didn't happen. Nor are these guys even more popular than the two guys you're thinking of right now when we talk about Spence and Crawford. But Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade was a fight that a lot of people in our circles talked about 2 years ago as a fight that could have been within this same realm. Now, it wouldn't have been bigger than either of the fights you mentioned when you talk about Floyd and Zab, or you talk about Spence and Crawford, but it would have been a fight in that same ilk. As far as what Jay was saying, just to give another example, another fight that I think would have been actually very similar in styles, not necessarily guys who are from the same backgrounds, but in styles would have been Miguel Cotto and Pacquiao. Excuse me.
Okay.
Miguel Cotto and Pacquiao, who had an awesome welterweight fight. Miguel is not as much of a pressure fighter as Spence is, but he does have some melding pressure fighter skills within his skill set when he was in his prime. And Pacquiao was just this super quick, super sharp puncher, that used his boxing ability to move around bigger guys and ambush. Yeah, and ambush you. And it worked for him against Cotto. He caused a big upset in that fight. So, I don't know.
Yeah, there's going to be some good comparisons, and we're going to do some videos where we kind of get into it. And I want to get the film study series going around this particular fight, where we'll watch a Bud fight, we'll watch a Spence fight. Not enough common opponents to make it like a big deal, but we definitely going to look at their common opponents in two different sittings, and then we could get our true perspective on some of the strategic things. Welcome, K. Malaire. Don't forget to hit that like button, sis. My sis from down south. Brandon House says, I got Spence in between 9th and 11th. There's a possibility there because his style leans to later stoppages. If you go Crawford, you may be thinking 5 or 6. If you're going to get him out of there, it's going to be quick. Jay comes back with Oscar versus Trinidad.
That's a great example. That's a great example.
The
only difference I would say is that Trinidad fits the mold of Spence or of a Hagler in that pressure fighting style. But I don't think Oscar, and I know that Oscar has had some highlight reel knockouts, not that he hasn't had any, but I don't think Oscar is the puncher that Terrence Crawford is at welterweight. I think that Oscar is more of a pure boxer than Crawford would be. But that is a close example as well, Jay. That's an awesome example.
Sure. Okay, Malaire comes back with, I got Crawford knocking Spence out in 11th. Man, if it goes that long, I'm just, I'm a believer that depending on where you join the fight, where it ends is going to kind of tell you who likely wins. I think there's a favorite in either outcome. Just for the record, to throw it out there, they've got Crawford by knockout, I think, plus 360, and Spence is plus 500. So obviously they favor Crawford for the knockout. And then they've got Spence by decision. It's kind of like similar numbers. It's like plus 300 and like plus 150, something like that. So Vegas is already laying it out. Obviously, those lines are going to move based on where the money goes. People are going to try to get paid and pick a crazy outcome. So right now is the best time to determine what they think the actual outcomes are going to be, because in 3 weeks or a month, when people's money start coming in, those lines are going to move based on where the bets are going, not by what they think the actual outcomes are. So we can circle back to that. I do want to get to some of our other topics, but we had the last card of the night. We had Alexis Rocha and Anthony Young. But before that, did you watch Oscar Duarte versus D'Angelo Keys?
I didn't get to watch any of that card.
Okay.
Wifey let me sit on the couch and watch 3 cards in a row.
Oh, yeah, you was out of there.
We had to go to dinner, and then we got home right when the main event was about to start. Okay. And, I had to pull that up on my phone. But
okay.
But yeah, I did get to watch the main event. I did not get to see any of that Golden Boy card other than
I didn't see the undercard, and based on the not co-main but the feature bout, that card probably was trash, kind of like the MVP card the night before. But Oscar Duarte versus D'Angelo Keys, I'm trying to figure out where they found Keys at. That dude looked like he didn't fight, and I got a tweet that I put out. I don't think I tagged you on it, but I'm gonna send it to you when we get done.
All right, bet.
That guy was worse, but Keys didn't look like he belonged in the ring with Duarte, and he got it. He took care of business. But in the main event, since we both got to see that, we're just gonna jump right to it. Anthony Young definitely he made, in my opinion, Alexis Rocha look better than he is.
Okay,
and it even made you wonder to some degree why Rocha let him last as long as he did. So I'm gonna throw it to you first, and you kind of give me your thoughts, and I'll bring up the rear.
Yeah, I think Anthony was playing a keep away style of game. I think Anthony knew going into that fight that Rocha was the bigger guy, the stronger puncher, and that, he was ultimately in there just trying to survive. And I think he would have, took a moral victory if he didn't get knocked out, because most of that fight he spent leaning up against the ropes. I mean, he spent a lot of his time leaning on the ropes, laboring on the ropes, and trying to tie up. He didn't really seem like he was really having any kind of a game plan to try to mount any kind of offense. And when he did, it seemed like he was clearly ineffective in doing so against Rocha. But as far as Rocha's performance is concerned, I think sometimes it's difficult to get guys out of there when that's the kind of mindset that they come into the fight with, which is that, hey, I'm just going to try to survive this fight. But it'll be interesting to see how he goes on from here. And that's the next thing that I wanted to really talk once you get to your thoughts is what's Rocha's level and what fight do you want to see him in next, knowing that obviously it's not going to be a world title fight because of what we have going on with Spence and Crawford for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So as far as the fight goes, I thought that Rocha was in control from start to finish. Again, I was a little disappointed in how long it took him to get him out of there. And I think that when you think of guys like Crawford, somebody that they're supposed to get out of there, they get him out of there. Gervonta Davis, if you're not supposed to hang around, you're not going to hang around. He gets you up out of there.
Can I say this one
Sure.
thing though? Let me interject real quick. I can agree with you, but there are two perfect examples, in my opinion, of guys that should have been out earlier for both guys. And that, how I feel about both guys. But Gervonta, when he fought against, what's the dude's name? The dude that ruptured his Achilles. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Oh, Gamboa?
Gamboa, that's one example of a guy who I thought he would get out of there a lot earlier because he's been hurt on multiple occasions. And then Terrence Crawford, when he fought Jose Benavidez, that's a guy that I thought he would get out of there a lot earlier. And both of those guys lasted until the final round of both fights. And in Terrence Crawford's, fight, he lasted until the last 20 seconds, essentially.
What's funny, though, is I would say Jose Benavidez is actually very durable. So I think that there's an exception there. When you think of Gamboa, while he gets buzzed easily, he's also durable. Gamboa would be fighting drunk for 3 rounds before you get him out of there. Look at like the Pitbull fight. Like that was kind of like the nail in the coffin as far as wanting to see Gamboa anymore. But leading up to that, a lot of guys would buzz him multiple times in the fight and not get him out of there. So I think that some dudes just have the durability of whatever, they're going to withstand the storm. And Gamboa is that guy. Jose, to me, he just got a beard on him. He tough. And it's just hard to get him out of there. And Crawford finally did at the end. And I think it was just a matter of just perfect timing. And that's a great puncher finding that perfect punch. And he ended that fight. But I do get what you're saying. But for the most part, the best finishers going to get you out of there. Alexis Rocha is just not a great finisher. Let's just be honest here. And I think that he's a average soul boxer who's just in a prime position that he can toil underneath. He can toil underneath the grate until, the titles become available, and then he can try and compete for that. Because when you think of like Blair Cobbs and stuff like that, I don't really rate them too far apart despite the outcome. And that kind of leads into what Jay's saying here. Golden Boy should have given Cobbs a rematch versus Rocha. Already not that I'm a fan, but the fact that it was so but better. Rocha looked good, though. Need to see him step up in comp. I don't think he looked good. I thought he looked okay, and that's cool. We all have our own perspectives. We all judge from our own seats. And I just think that he's fighting basic fighters, and he's looking just okay against basic fighters. So if you put him in there with some better level competition, I just think that them dudes are going to wash him. Your Virgils, your Stanionis, them kind of dudes is going to be hell for him. So from here, I think he just toils away fighting average dudes and just kind of rebuilding his record on Golden Boy cards as a main event fighting basic fighters.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, ultimately the play is probably going to be, if you're Golden Boy, to try to get him back into that mandatory slot for the WBO title. And you hope that Virgil, wins his fight next month or 2 months from now. It's still
so he's out of the way.
So that he's in the WBA slot to get that belt. And hopefully once the Spence Crawford situation handles itself for the first fight, if there's any of those belts that have to drop off because those guys are made mandatory, well, then either those guys get awarded with one of those belts and they can fight each other. I think that that's the next big fight. Not that I favor him in that fight, but I think an Alexis Rocha versus Virgil Ortiz fight for a vacant title, for a title that's awarded to Virgil or to Rocha. Hell, I mean, it may even be a unification fight.
I was thinking that.
If Spence and Crawford are mandated after their first fight where one of the guys becomes undisputed, but they still want to have a rematch with each other, maybe they just vacate the two titles that are, included in that situation, the WBA and the WBO, and then those two fighters maybe are possibly awarded those belts. Well, now looky here. Golden Boy has a unification already ready-made between two guys they have under contract. And I'm going to tell you right now, that fight sells anywhere in the Southwest. They can put it in Phoenix, LA, San Diego, Dallas.
That's Dallas versus San Antonio.
They can put that.
You got to go Dallas.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. Virgil's from Dallas, but Rocha's from California. So you got that angle of it, too. So, it'll be interesting to see where they want to put that fight. Golden Boy is based in LA. So maybe they lean that way, or maybe they just do it in neutral ground and say, hey, let's meet in the middle. We'll do it in Phoenix. And a lot of people are starting to go to a lot of fights in Arizona. So that's a real possibility. I think it's an entertaining fight. I think he gets knocked out, Rocha does, but I think it's an entertaining fight because he's not, he's not going to give up easy. He's not going to give up on his first title fight.
Well, I mean, you put him in there with Virgil and that body attack, he ain't going to have a choice. He's just going to beat his ass.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. I want to see it. Now, so I want people to get, when I'm talking absolutes like that, that's never me saying I don't want to see him fight. I just lean a certain way based on tactical observation.
Yeah, he's clearly the favorite. Virgil is clearly the favorite. He's clearly the guy that should win the fight.
Yeah.
However, I think it's an entertaining fight, and it's a fight that people would be happy to see, yourself as well. Sure. And hopefully it's a fight that gets made because I want to see Virgil in, high level entertaining fights. It's unfortunate that it hasn't been with Spence or with Crawford. And it's probably not going to be with Jaron Ennis unless Jaron Ennis is leaving PBC anytime soon, which I doubt. Those would be the next two guys. That'd be the only other fight I'd want to see more than that.
I think that's going to be very contentious on what the belts are in 2024 because like something you alluded to, I'm just going to throw it out there for people to get the perspective. And Q and I haven't discussed this, but I'm going to throw it out for all to observe and give their perspective. I think that, like you said, at 147, we're going to get this undisputed fight. And because these Mandos are coming up, I think there's a certain number the sanctioning bodies need to see sales wise in order to say, sit on their hands, BS the fighters that are in line and say, listen, you're going to get a chance at a vacant title, but let these dudes rematch because we want that bag. And I think all the fighters, all the fighters are going to be willing to say, hell, I ain't got to fight neither one of them dudes and I could probably get a vacant belt and I just got to wait a little longer. I can stay busy and make some money on their undercard if I can. And the PBC guys and the Showtime guys might lean to that because let's say they fight at 147 and then let's say Bud wins or whatever, and then they rematch back on Showtime at 147. This might be more appealing for Boots because now you're an IBF Mando or you're an IBF interim champ. You could be right there saying one of them belts is mine when them dudes get done tonight. And now you're in the spotlight because when they hand you that belt in 2 weeks, people know who you are because you were on the biggest card in boxing. So just me thinking way ahead, I went down the rabbit hole, but I think the people out there get it. That's what I'm thinking. Otherwise, if it don't do enough numbers under, say, 700K, I think the sanctioning bodies are going to say, nah, we need these Mandos to get these belts moving. Y'all go do that shit at 54. So, and it's still going to be a good fight, and I think both guys will be stronger and healthier as well. Anything else you want to say on Rocha before we move on to Clarissa Shields and what's her name here?
Cornejo?
Marcela Cornejo.
Maricela Cornejo. Yeah. I've been working on my Spanish, brother, as you can tell. I've been working on my Spanish.
You must be going to Mexico because
Maricela Cornejo. I've been working.
I took 3 years of Spanish. I can't roll my R's for nothing.
Last thoughts on just the welterweight division as a whole, since we started there and we'll end there. I'm praying and hoping that at some point these guys continue to win and we get to see a Virgil versus Jaron Ennis fight, unification, title fight, something, because that is what boxing is made for when you talk about, the pressure guy against the boxer puncher. And in a lot of ways, ironically, I think that this fight is very, very similar.
It's Spence Crawford.
To Spence Crawford. That's literally what I was about to say. And it's ironic because there was a topic that came up on social media as to which of these guys, when you talk about Spence, you talk about Crawford, who should they bring in for sparring? And some great observations were made in the comments because we got some smart people on Twitter. There's some crazy people on Twitter, but we got some smart people on Twitter. That, Crawford should probably bring in Virgil and spar with him. And Spence should probably bring in Jaron Ennis and spar with him because it's clear that neither one of those guys are probably going to fight each other, at least not at 147, maybe down the line toward the end of both of those guys' career. But if they want the best kind of preparation for each other, when you talk about Spence Crawford, Jaron Ennis and Virgil Ortiz are probably two of the best guys you could get.
For sure. Just because we talking about the fight, before we change topics, I want to throw this up for the people that missed it. This shit is funny to me. That's funny. Let me get this comment off the screen. Hang on a second. Hey, that is witty.
Aquaman.
I can't lie, man. That's funny to me.
It's at the Bellagio too. You peeped that, right?
Yeah, I peeped that. Yeah, I was just out there, so it like hit me right away. Like, okay, Vegas.
Right.
And then you got this one, and the fact that they got all the belts and the pictures and stuff like that, bro. This is. I like the build up. I'm all about it. His house has been shit, but I'm with it. But we're gonna move on. Clarissa Shields versus Maricela Cornejo. Mm-hmm. This is a replacement opponent for Hannah Gabriel. So this was supposed to be a rematch. Gabriel's did test positive for a banned substance, so she was pulled from the fight. Cornejo stepped right in. I saw an interview where she talked about being ready, and she's happy to be called on to jump into this fight. So Q, I'm like Errol Spence on this grill. I'm gonna keep my basics. I'm gonna go run out here, flip these wings one more time. I'm gonna throw it to you to set it up, and I'll be right back to talk about Shields.
Yeah, so I mean, the long story short of the situation is that the fight was originally scheduled to be, Clarissa Shields' first homecoming fight, defending her, world titles against former, world champion, 175-pound champion. And I'm going to go ahead and get these rankings pulled up real quick just so that we can see. Everybody just hold on for just 1 second with me. I'm going to try to get to this really quickly because I want to go over this accurately. Because Clarissa Shields was originally scheduled to have a fight back in her hometown, and it ended up having to get rescheduled with a new opponent because her last opponent failed a drug test, and unfortunately, it looks like she's not going to be able to get to fight a more known woman. When we talk about Hannah Gabriels, I don't know why I drew a blank on Hannah Gabriels, but Hannah Gabriels was failed a drug test. There's been some reports that have come out that says that how she failed her drug test was administering some steroid, medication to her dog that had a surgery. Lou DiBella, who has worked with her on numerous occasions, promoting her fights, did post some photos on social media, basically saying that this is how she ended up, testing positive for the banned substance clenbuterol, because clenbuterol is in the drugs that she was administering to her dog. But that's how the cookie crumbles. Unfortunately, you have to be careful what you are using, what's around you while you're actively training for a fight, because you know that you're going to be tested. So Maricela Cornejo gets the fight instead of Hannah Gabriel. So Maricela Cornejo is a standard stand-in opponent. She's not a world beater. And to be completely honest with you, I wasn't overly excited for a rematch with Hannah Gabriels. So from her to go from a woman who actually has fought her before and had some success against her to now she's going to be fighting a woman who's 16-5, 6 KOs. She's lost 5 times previously. She's currently 36 years old, so she's getting up there in age a little bit as far as fighting is concerned. And her last fight was against a fighter who didn't have a win on their record. She just fought in March against Sheila Kuna. and she stopped her in 1 round. So that goes to show you the level of competition that she's been in with. And that fight was only an 8-rounder. And as a matter of fact, and I'll bring this back up when T comes back in, the last time she had a championship level fight was when she fought Franchon Cruz back in 2019, where she lost a unanimous decision to Franchon Cruz. I mean, the woman hasn't had a championship level fight in almost 4 years. She has 5 losses. This is kind of alluding to more of what I mentioned to T before, which is that there's a serious lack of depth as far as options for fighters like Claressa and other women who might be champions at 160 or above weight classes in boxing. And this really does highlight that, because I don't think that Miss Cornejo has much of a chance at all of even making this competitive.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I'm just going to chime in real quick. Mine is simple. I think Claressa's going to show out. It's a hometown fight. I think it's the type of opponent. Like I mentioned last week, when you do homecoming, you pick somebody either you've beaten or you can feel confident that you can beat. And I think that that's what we have right here. I'm not predicting the stoppage, but I just think it's going to be Claressa just swarming, out punching, out boxing, and just styling on her. And she's going to make it an event for her people. And I think if it can go to 10, obviously that's what she wants, because she wants to give the people their money's worth. So I think that that's going to be good for her, good for her brand, because she's been wanting to fight back in the U.S. for a minute. We could go ahead and jump into another topic, and then we'll get into our closing stuff. Shakur versus Loma. Shakur and Loma flipped positions in the rankings after the fight. Even though Shakur was supposed to be in line to be the WBC mandatory, they changed spots. What do you think about that change? What and what do you think about the ramifications of that?
Well, I don't agree with it, obviously, because Shakur hasn't done anything to warrant him being demoted any kind of slot. He hasn't lost a fight. He hasn't failed a drug test. He hasn't missed any kind of requirements that the WBC may have to where there'd be any kind of punishment administered. And he's not been that inactive. He just fought. So
like a month ago.
there's not any reason for it to have happened. The only reason I think that this kind of move is going to go kind of under the radar is if Devin Haney does vacate his titles and move up to 140, because ultimately I think that means that Loma and Shakur will still be fighting for the title against each other. As where if this situation had affected Shakur's ability to fight for a title, then maybe there would be a little bit more outrage. But because Loma and Shakur were already kind of lined up to fight each other next, if Loma had beaten Devin, I don't think that you're going to see much complaint. I did see an interview. I can't remember who did it, so I apologize for not being able to reference them here. But Shakur was on an interview on YouTube where they asked him about being slated, a slot below Loma now because of the protesting that Loma's team had for, the results from the fight with Devin Haney. And he didn't seem much too bothered about it. And I think it has a lot to do with the things that I mentioned, which is that it doesn't really affect his positioning, because 2 people got to get in the ring to fight. And if he's number 2, he's going to be the next guy that Loma has to fight anyway. Plus, Loma and, Bob Arum have already said that was the next guy that they wanted to go ahead and give that opportunity and challenge to. On Loma's side, it's probably because it's the biggest next money fight that he can have with Top Rank. And then on Shakur's side, it's probably a little bit of the same, but also it's a title shot against somebody well-known. So
divisions.
Win-win there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it because it was unnecessary, because if all the things that you're saying are true, then why did you need to move them?
They could have put Loma at number 2 and done the same thing. Yeah.
You could have left it the same way. So I feel like what other ingredient was added to the pot that we don't know is part of the cook right now? You know what I'm saying? What else they put in the boil that we don't know about, that we're going to find out in 3 months when some strange fight happens and all of a sudden there's these opportunities that don't happen for Shakur. I always wonder about little sketchy things like that. So to me, it's at least notable to be concerned. Like, well, why did you make this move now? And what's the significance a couple months from now? Some things we don't see, until down the line. So we'll see how it plays out. One thing I want to throw up on the screen, and then we'll get to our closing remarks. want to throw something up, and this is a guy you might be familiar with. Let me see.
And I'm actually looking right now just to make sure. It looks like, yeah, Shakur and Loma are both 1 and 2 with the WBC and the WBO. Mm-hmm. So, ironically, if Devin was to vacate both titles and Bob, has the paper bag ready, he can get both of those guys 2 vacant titles in the same fight. They can do a 2-for-1 special.
Yeah.
Next, and both of those guys can fight, because they're both ranked in the top 2 as the next 2 guys. That's a strong possibility. We've seen the double mandatory from the WBC and the WBO with the guy who fought Stephen Fulton, Daniel Roman was the double mandatory for the WBC, WBO. So we know that the relationship is there and the precedent is there, that maybe they just make that a dual vacant title shot for both guys.
It's possible. It's possible. I want to see how it plays out. I did realize they were ranked back to back in a couple, and I think it's an IBF. Now they're both kind of low in the IBF. I think it might be.
I'm looking WBA. Right now. I'll go ahead and.
What's the WBA?
You want me to share?
Yeah, you can throw it up real quick. The WBA is the one I want to see because they're pretty high in another ranking system as well, like top 5.
They're both in the top 5 for the IBF as well. Well, they're top 5 in all 4 actually.
Okay, let me see. So we got the WBC is Loma and Shakur at 1 and 2, 3 and 4 in the WBA, 3 and 4 in the IBF. Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, I thought one of them was like higher, but I forgot the IBF has a vacant spot.
I'm gonna see when this got published just to double check because I didn't.
That should be your
this
May
is from
one.
May 15th, so this is recent. This is
updated May 15th. Okay, so basically that's like right before the fight.
Yeah. So
okay,
I mean,
no biggie.
To me, I mean, I know this sounds crazy, and they probably won't do it because they make less money sanctioning wise to put them all in one fight. But when you got all of those guys, the same 2 guys lined up in the top 5 for every belt, I mean, you realistically could put all those belts on the line in a fight between the 2 of them.
You don't lose. You still get the 3% off of each one. But
yeah,
you got to see what's the marquee fights because the WBA may not be interested in that because you better off having Tank with that belt, to be honest. Yeah. Because you know what kind of money is going to be netted off that. So I'm gonna throw something on the screen for you, bro. Hey guys, we didn't script this, but is this it? Nah, this ain't it. Hold on. I got the graphic I'm gonna throw up on the screen. I'm not being petty. You know who that is, right? That's Rashard Hicks.
Of course I do, yeah. Okay,
so for those out there, this is a friend of ours. Q has trained with him. Yep. I've done some work with him. Rashard Too Quick Hicks. He's a military veteran, a friend, and he's going to be fighting. Hold on, that's at June 17th. He's got a fight coming up. It's on pay-per-view. You can look him up on social media. He's fighting at 154 pounds. I just saw a post from him today. He's 3 weeks out, and he's at 155.8. So he said he's going back down to 147.
Not too much work to do.
Yeah,
to make that
he got a pound to lose in like 3 weeks. So he said he's going back down to 47 after this fight. But he's a great fighter. I'm going to post some clips of his last fight on our channel coming up. But I just wanted to share that with Q and share with you guys. Support this brother because he's got a great story. Cancer survivor, all that good stuff. Really good dude. Really knows his boxing. And I just wanted to shine a light on not only a military veteran who's given a lot for this country on this Memorial Day weekend, but also for a friend, just to share that and put that information out there. And don't trip. He gonna come on this show and do an interview and talk some boxing with us too.
Absolutely.
We just got to get our schedules together. I've already tried to set it up. We just got to get the schedules with me, him, and Q. But we definitely gonna chop it up with Too Quick and have some fun with that. So Q, we don't need a coin toss. I'm going to concede to you. Are you ready for your closing remarks?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw it your way.
Yeah, I think ultimately this was a strong weekend of boxing overall. I think that when you talk about a busy card schedule, not a lot of mainstream fights, but a quality overall schedule of fights, very entertaining fights overall. action fights in all three of the main events in the UK. It was a solid weekend, and there are some great fights coming up. We're looking forward to, obviously, Claressa's going to get her chance to go back in the ring, possibly for the final time of the year for her before she tries, her hand back in MMA. There's not really been any major news there, but you're going to have that, and then we're going to look forward to June, because June is going to be a solid month of fights. We're coming up on, the middle of the year, and we've had an awesome 2023 so far. So everybody stay tuned, man. We're going to continue to give content. We're going to continue to, feed you guys all the information you guys may need. And if there's anything else that we're going to need to go ahead and highlight, please let us know, because we'd be happy to do so. Got to unmute.
For me, I have an axe to grind. I want to talk about what's cap and what's not cap, and I'm going to keep it short. So what I found recently is that we've seen a lot of people that when their favorite fighter is in line to fight someone else, they start to overhype the competition, and they also start to overhype who that person's fighting. I'm going to use this as a rough example because I think that that's what happened in this particular situation. Devin Haney and Gervonta Davis seem to be on some type of collision course, but because of the powers that be, it may not happen. However, leading up to the Loma versus Devin fight, a lot of people began to maybe hype up Loma a little bit more than necessary, in my opinion, because, and these are Gervonta Davis fans who don't really like Devin. They've been hyping him in order to say, if he beats this guy and Tank beats him, then Tank is greater. I just don't like that dynamic of capping for a fighter because he's going to increase the resume of your favorite fighter. As boxing fans, we have to stop that. We have to keep it honest. If you said this guy was trash 2 years ago or a year ago, he's not going to get better if he's already a veteran fighter. So I'm ready for the cap in boxing, Twitter, and YouTube to stop overhyping people, stop flip-flopping and transforming. Say what you say, believe what you say, and stand on it. And that's my piece, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, man, I mean, there's a lot of truth in what you're saying there. I think that people just need to be comfortable, in short, with giving credit where credit is due. If a guy takes a difficult fight and he wins the fight by a narrow margin, hey, man, give the guy the credit. You could be wrong. T and I are going to, debate and have differing opinions on the Spence Crawford fight. But at the end of the fight, there's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser, unless there's a draw, which we hope is not the case. And one of us is going to be right and one of us is going to be wrong. And listen, we're going to come on the show and we're going to say, hey, I was wrong in my prediction and here's why. If we had a lot more of that on Twitter, I think we'd be great and we'd be in a much better place, which is why my standard answer, man, to anybody that wants to debate me is you're more than welcome to come on the show, come on camera, and we can talk about why you feel the way that you feel live and in action, and we can stay on topic. But people that want to, pick a side because of a friend, because they're from your region, because you like the guy, that's fine. That's great. You can be a fan of them. That's no problem with that. But, if he loses a fight or if somebody else has a better resume, don't think that we're not going to say that, because we are.
For sure. And come July 30th, one of us is going to be a little bit bigger off these push-ups because we're going to throw that bet out there. We ain't put the wager down yet, but we're going to bet these push-ups. Somebody going to be a little bit buffer come July 30th. But we do appreciate you all for tuning in. This is the Mic Check Podcast. This is T-Word. That's my boy Q.
Yes,
we appreciate y'all tuning in. Please smash that like button on the way out. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back next Sunday, 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank y'all again. We out. Peace.